The sun rises low over the Bug River, glinting off endless lines of tanks, trucks, and marching men. Dust clouds bloom behind the German columns, turning the dawn into a pale haze of amber and ash. Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history, is underway. Major Karl-Heinz Butcher, commander of the 7th Panzer Regiment, stands atop his Panzer III Osif J goggles pressed to his face. The smell of exhaust and oil is thick in the air. Behind him, hundreds of tanks idle in formation, engines rumbling like an iron heartbeat. Signal from Army Group Center, his radio operator shouts above the noise. Advance order confirmed. Minsk by day 3. Butcher nods. Let's show the Russians what blitzkrieg means. Engines roar. Treads bite into soft earth. Across the frontier, the Wehrmacht surges forward, 3 million men, 3,000 tanks, and 2,000 aircraft moving in perfect mechanical rhythm. Villages vanish under the thunder of tracks. Columns of smoke rise on the horizon where Luftwaffe bombs strike Soviet airfields. For the first days, it feels like France again, swift victories, shattered armies, and endless prisoners. German tankers, confident in their Panzer IIIs and IVs, push deep into Soviet territory. Yet in the radio chatter, something new begins to whisper. Reports from Army Group North encountered heavy tank near Rasenii, multiple hits, no effect. Army Group Center, unidentified Soviet armor, sloped hull-wide, tracks heavy gun. Field Marshal von Bock frowns at the field map. Nonsense, he mutters. Their tanks are obsolete. T-26 BT series no match for us. But within days, the myth of superiority begins to crack. June 25th, near Dubisa River. The 6th Panzer Division halts as a single Soviet machine, green-gray, hulking unknown, rolls out of the woods. Shells from the Germans' 37mm guns ping off its armor like stones on a cathedral wall. One Panzer crewman shouts into his intercom. It's like shooting peas at a bear. The strange tank fires back a single deafening blast from a 76mm gun. The first German tank erupts in fire, then another. Smoke and panic ripple through the formation. Hours later, after calling in artillery and Stukas, the monster finally burns, but not before disabling over a dozen German vehicles. Its charred hull is inspected by engineers that evening. The word spreads like wildfire. The Soviets have unleashed something new. It is called the T-34, and nothing in the German arsenal can kill it, not yet. July 1941, the outskirts of Smolensk. The summer air hums with flies and the distant crack of artillery. German panzer crews gather around a captured Soviet tank, the wreck still smoking from the morning's battle. The heat shimmers off its thick, sloped armor. Dust and grease cling to every plate. Major Butcher crouches beside it, running his gloved hand over the glacis. 30, maybe 45 millimeters, he mutters, tapping the steel with a wrench. But angled like this, it's worth twice that. Beside him, a technical officer from the 4th Army squints at the wide tracks. And these, he adds, it glides over mud like a tractor. Our panzers sink up to the turret rings. They stand in silence for a long moment, listening to the engine still ticking as it cools. One of the mechanics spits into the dirt. We hit it 6 times, point blank. Nothing. The Germans have spent years perfecting blitzkrieg speed, precision radio coordination, and concentrated armor thrusts. Their tanks were designed for maneuver, not brute strength. The Panzer III's 37mm gun had dominated the battlefields of Poland and France. But here against the Soviet T-34, it's as effective as a child's toy. At field headquarters, reports flood in. Soviet tanks appear invulnerable to our standard anti-tank weapons. They attack at full speed through swampy terrain. Shells bounce off at all angles, impossible to penetrate except at close range. By early August, captured crewmen identify 2 models, the T-34 medium tank and the KV-1 heavy tank. German intelligence officers exchange uneasy looks. The T-34, they learn, carries a 76.2mm L11 gun, capable of piercing any German tank at 1,000 meters. Its diesel engine resists fire. Its armor, sloped at 60 degrees, deflects shots that would shatter others. Field Marshal Guderian, commanding Panzer Group II, writes in his diary, that the T-34 is the finest tank in the world. Privately, he fumes. Our Panzerwaffe has been outclassed. In Berlin, the news rattles the corridors of the Oberkommando des Heeres OKH. Design bureaus scramble to understand the new threat. Engineers from Henschel Mann and Daimler-Benz are ordered to examine captured hulls. The verdict is grim. To defeat this machine, Germany will need entirely new tanks, heavier, thicker, and more powerful than anything in service. But designing them will take time. And time on the Eastern Front is a currency spent in blood. By late July, German armor columns begin to lose momentum. The terrain, endless forests, rivers, and bogs chews up supply lines. Soviet counterattacks, often led by T-34s, strike like ghosts. A single platoon of these tanks can delay an entire division. At the village of Mtsensk in early October, Colonel Mikhail Katakov's 4th Tank Brigade ambushes Guderian's spearhead. His T-34s burst from concealment, firing on the move, shredding the leading panzers. German shells ricochet uselessly. When Stuka dive bombers arrive, the T-34s simply vanish into the woods, only to reappear elsewhere minutes later. Butcher's regiment loses 10 tanks in one day. They're like phantoms, one gunner whispers that night, staring into the forest fire glow. You hear them before you see them. Tracks in the mud, then death. The myth of German invincibility begins to fracture. The Blitzkrieg, once unstoppable, now bleeds in the snow and mud. Still, the Wehrmacht pushes onward toward Moscow. The generals convince themselves it's only a matter of logistics. Yet deep down, the truth is clear: the balance of armored warfare has shifted, and the shock of that realization is only beginning to settle in. October 1941, south of Vyazma. The sky is a bruised gray, and sleet lashes against the turrets of the retreating German armor. Mud clogs the tracks, sucking at steel like quicksand. Major Butcher's Panzer III grinds forward, its Maybach engine straining. Every mile now feels like 10. The radio crackles with static and broken voices, confusion, retreat, encirclement. Forward elements of 10th Panzer report. Heavy tank fire. Repeat, heavy tank fire, can't penetrate. Artillery ineffective. Request Luftwaffe support. But the Luftwaffe is stretched thin, its planes grounded by autumn storms and endless sorties. The Wehrmacht's lightning war has slowed into a grinding slugfest. For the first time, the Germans face a foe who refuses to collapse. The Red Army, though battered, learns fast. Soviet engineers repair tanks in the open fields. Factories evacuated east of the Urals to Chelyabinsk, Nizhny Tagil, and Sverdlovsk begin to roar back to life, producing thousands of new T-34s monthly. Their crude welds and rough finishes don't matter. What matters is quantity and design simplicity. By contrast, the Germans find themselves trapped in their own excellence. Each Panzer III is a masterpiece of engineering, but it takes weeks to build and repair. Each new model requires precision machining, rare materials, and skilled labor luxuries the Soviets have sacrificed for raw production. Colonel Heinz Guderian visits the front to see the situation firsthand. He rides through the mud in an open Kubelwagen, past burned villages and frozen corpses. When he reaches the forward armor line, he inspects a knocked-out T-34. The tank's upper plate bears gouges where 37mm and even 50mm shells have failed to penetrate. He orders one of his men, "Get me the angle of that glacis." 60 degrees, Herr General. Guderian exhales slowly. There's your answer. Every shot deflects. We've built for flat armor, they've built for survival. That evening, he sends a coded message back to Berlin. Immediate need for improved anti-tank capability. Recommend development of heavy and medium designs equivalent or superior to T-34. Inside OKH headquarters, that message joins dozens like it. Designers begin sketches code-named VK30.01D for a new medium, VK45.01H for a heavy. These would eventually become the Panther and Tiger. But the war will not wait for prototypes. In the field, improvisation rules. German tankers learn to aim for the T-34's rear or side armor, to use ambush tactics to call in 88mm flak guns whenever possible. Infantrymen plant mines and Molotov cocktails. Officers whisper bitter jokes to stop a T-34. You need God or an 88. The Eastern Front becomes a vast laboratory of adaptation. Both sides learn from each other, changing tactics, formations, and doctrines in real time. At the Battle of Mtsensk, Guderian witnesses how Soviet tank commanders use cover and mobility, never standing still, firing while on the move. Their sloped armor turns even glancing shots into ricochets. They are not the peasants we expected, he admits to his aide. Meanwhile, the German High Command struggles with a new kind of fear, technological surprise. It had always been Germany that stunned the world with innovation. Stuka's Panzer spearheads, radio-coordinated warfare. But now it is the Soviets who hold the cutting edge. By winter, as temperatures plunge to 30 degrees Celsius, the situation worsens. Engines freeze. Oil thickens. German crews light fires beneath their tanks to thaw them. The T-34 with its diesel engine and wide tracks moves easily over snow that traps German machines. In one desperate radio exchange near Kaluga, Butcher's voice trembles with frustration. Command, we are immobilized. Tracks frozen. The Russians are circling us. Hold until reinforced. Reinforced with what shovels? Gunfire crackles through the transmission. Then silence. By December, the German drive on Moscow collapses. Thousands of vehicles lie abandoned in the snow, frozen tombs of steel. For the first time since the war began, Hitler's armies have been stopped. And at the center of that stunning reversal stands a tank the Germans had laughed at only months before, a Soviet machine built of steel mud and defiance. December 1941, outside Moscow. The wind cuts like a knife across the frozen steppe. Snow drifts rise higher than tank turrets. Every breath turns to ice. What was meant to be a 3-month campaign has become a death sentence. The Wehrmacht's advance, once unstoppable, is frozen in place. Major Karl-Heinz Butcher's Panzer III sits half-buried in snow, its treads locked solid. The crew huddle inside the steel shell, sharing a cigarette for warmth. The heater's dead. The fuel's congealed. Through the cracked periscope, Butcher sees movement shadows gliding across the white horizon. Not men, not trucks, tanks. Dozens of them. Russians, his gunner whispers. T-34s. They come like ghosts through the blizzard engines, muffled by the wind turrets, turning in eerie unison. The German 37mm and 50mm guns bark to life, but the shells spark harmlessly off the sloped armor. Sparks flash like fireflies in the snowstorm. Switch to HE, aim for the treads, Butcher orders. The loader curses as his hands freeze to the shell casing. The first shot lands nothing. The second, a lucky hit to the track. The T-34 stumbles, slews sideways. For a heartbeat, it seems vulnerable. Then its turret swivels and a 76mm round slams into the German tank's glacis. The world becomes smoke flame and ringing steel. Butcher wakes minutes later in the snow beside what's left of his tank. He can't hear his men calling anymore. Only the moan of the wind and the grinding of approaching treads. He crawls toward a ditch, half-blind, clutching the iron cross pinned to his collar, a souvenir of easier wars. Across hundreds of miles of front, the same nightmare repeats. The T-34 becomes an omen. Entire German battalions break at the sight of them. Their broad tracks glide where trucks bog down. Their engines roar while German fuel freezes solid. In Berlin, Hitler rages. Our panzers were supposed to dominate. He shouts at his generals. What have you given me, toy tanks? Armaments Minister Fritz Todt argues that heavier designs are already in development. We are testing the VK-45 prototype, Mein Führer. It will have armor twice as thick a gun to match the T-34. Hitler slams his fist on the table. Then build it faster. Build me a beast that cannot die. That beast will soon have a name, Tiger. But the men on the front can't wait for prototypes. They improvise with whatever they have, mounting 88mm flak guns on open trucks, digging them into snowbanks to ambush T-34s. Whole crews freeze to death beside their weapons' fingers locked around triggers. Even now, the Soviet advance shows no mercy. General Zhukov drives his counteroffensive with mathematical precision. Waves of infantry and armor crash into the exhausted Wehrmacht. The Red Army has learned that the Germans can be beaten. In the ruins of Klinbocher, now commanding what's left of his battalion, watches another T-34 roll past his hiding place. The tank's armor glistens with frost and soot. Its turret bears a red star and the word Motherland scrawled in white paint. Inside, he imagines the crew, young, hard-eyed, singing through cracked lips. He feels something he hasn't felt since France fear. That winter, the Eastern Front becomes a graveyard of ambition. Thousands of German tanks lie frozen in ruts of ice, their engines silent, their crews buried beneath snowdrifts. The Blitzkrieg is dead-killed not by generals or strategy, but by cold mud and a tank the Germans never expected. When the thaw comes in spring, the survivors crawl from their holes to find a world transformed. The Red Army holds the line before Moscow. Soviet industry has moved east out of reach. And in the factories of Henschel and MAN, German engineers begin feverish work on two new machines, the Tiger and the Panther. Designed in the image of the enemy's creation, the tank war has entered a new age, one born from envy, desperation, and the brutal lessons of the Russian winter. Spring 1942, Kassel, Germany. Snow still lies in thin crusts along the factory roofs when the first prototype rolls out beneath gray clouds. Engineers, officers, and armaments officials gather to watch. The machine lurches forward, massive, square, brutal. Its sides gleam with fresh armor plating. Its turret turns with a deep metallic groan. On its barrel, freshly stamped in black, are the words 8.8 cm KBUK 36 L56. This is the Tiger I Hitler's answer to the T-34. At Henschel's test ground, the engineers stand in tense silence. The tank fires its first round at a captured Soviet T-34 hull 300 meters away. The shell smashes through the front armor and exits clean through the back plate. Gasps ripple through the crowd. One of the observers mutters, "Finally something that bites back." Across Germany, other workshops follow suit. MAN develops a faster, lower-sloped armor design. The Panther, a direct imitation of the T-34's geometry, but equipped with superior optics and an L-70 high-velocity gun. Krupp, Daimler-Benz, and Porsche compete for contracts, each promising the Führer a machine that will restore German dominance. But time is the true enemy now. The Eastern Front is bleeding daily. At Kharkov and Rzhev, Soviet counterblows grind down divisions already starving for fuel and ammunition. Even as prototypes succeed in trials, the field commanders plead, "We need tanks now, not perfection." Meanwhile, on the other side of the continent, the Red Army is doing the opposite. At factories hidden beyond the Urals, Nizhny Tagil, Gorky, and Chelyabinsk, soon nicknamed Tankograd, Soviet women, teenagers, and old men work 12-hour shifts. Sparks shower from welding torches. Assembly lines run through the night under the glare of floodlights. By mid-1942, T-34s are rolling off the lines at a rate of 1,200 per month. The design has been simplified: two-man turrets, single-piece castings, fewer components. Crude but unstoppable. At the front, German crews fight on through Tavs. The Panzer IV, upgunned to a long-barrel 75 mm, becomes the workhorse, but even it struggles against the tide. Butcher's new command. The remnants of the 7th Panzer Regiment receives a handful of these upgraded panzers. They are told to hold the Don. He looks at the orders and shakes his head. "Hold the Don," he mutters. With what hope and spare parts? In July, at the edge of a wheat field near Voronezh, he gets his first look at the new Soviet formations. Hundreds of T-34s advance in waves, their turrets glinting in the sun, the ground trembling under their tracks. The noise is like thunder from below the earth. The Germans open fire. Panzer IVs hit from hull-down positions. The air fills with smoke and dirt, the whistle of shells, the scream of ricochets. For a moment, the field disappears in dust. When it clears, the T-34s are still coming. Some burn black smoke trailing, but more pour through the gaps. "Where's our Luftwaffe support?" a radio operator yells. "Grounded fuel shortages," comes the reply. Then silence as another shell detonates nearby. By nightfall, only a handful of panzers remain. Butcher's own vehicle limps away, tread-damaged crew shaken. The field behind him glows orange, dozens of wrecks, both German and Soviet, scattered like bones. He writes in his log that night, "They never stop. We destroy one and 10 take its place. It's like fighting the earth itself." While Germany toils on its masterpiece tanks, the Soviet Union has built an army of good-enough machines. And as the German Tiger slowly enters production heavy complex prone to breakdowns, the T-34 spreads like wildfire across the steppes. Still, for the first time, the Germans glimpse a chance to even the scales. In the proving grounds near Kummersdorf, the Tiger's shells punch through armor that had once seemed invincible. Word reaches the front lines. Relief is coming. A new beast. A real panzer. The men cling to that rumor like faith. But faith doesn't win wars steel and fuel do. And by the summer of 1942, Germany is running short of both. September 1942, Volga River, Soviet Union. The city of Stalingrad burns like a furnace. Flames twist above shattered factories, lighting the night with an orange hell glow. Bombs fall endlessly, flattening entire districts. Yet amid the ruins, the Red Army digs in. Soviet soldiers fight from cellars, sewers, and the twisted skeletons of buildings that once made tractors, now they make tanks. From the opposite bank, ferries shuttle reinforcements across the Volga under shell fire. Among them come the newest version of the T-34, the model 1942, with a sharper turret and better armor. Some tanks roll straight from the assembly line to the front paint, still tacky factory crews still aboard. They drive directly into combat. Inside one of those tanks sits Sergeant Ivan Kozadub, a mechanic turned gunner. His face is blackened by soot, his hands raw. The commander bangs the hatch and shouts over the engine roar, "For Stalingrad, not one step back." The T-34s lurch forward through the rubble, firing at muzzle flashes in the dark. Their diesel engines drown in smoke and screams. They move like beasts through the inferno hulls, glowing red-hot from heat and shrapnel. The Germans can scarcely believe it. Major Butcher's regiment, part of the 24th Panzer Division, now fights street by street. Their supply lines are cut, ammunition-low engines choking on dust. The radio chatter is chaos. "They're coming out of the basements. We need air support now. Our shells can't stop them in these alleys." He peers through his commander's hatch. The streets are lined with wrecks, Soviet, German, indistinguishable in the smoke. A T-34 bursts from behind a collapsed wall and rams a Panzer IV head-on. The German shell explodes harmlessly off its glacis. A second later, the T-34's gun fires. The Panzer detonates turret, flipping into the air like a coin. The city becomes a machine of attrition, metal, grinding against metal, will against will. On the maps in Berlin, Stalingrad is a name of pride. "We will take the city named for Stalin," Hitler insists. But to the men trapped inside, it's a tomb. Winter returns crueler than before. Snow mixes with soot and blood. The T-34s thrive again, where the German tanks choke. Wide tracks keep them moving through the slush. Their diesel engines ignite even in the cold. German crews desperate strip fuel from aircraft just to keep their panzers running. Then in November, the trap snaps shut. Operation Uranus, the Soviet counteroffensive, smashes through the Romanian flanks guarding the German 6th Army. Hundreds of T-34s burst from the fog, cutting supply routes and encircling 300,000 Axis soldiers. Butcher's unit on the western edge of the pocket fights until their last shells are gone. "We're surrounded," his radio operator whispers. Butcher looks at the horizon where red stars gleam on the turrets advancing through the snow. "Then we fight, surrounded," he says quietly. "We fight like they do." For weeks, the pocket shrinks. The Soviets close in from all sides, their armor moving like wolves around a wounded beast. When the last airstrip falls, the Germans have no escape. On February 2nd, 1943, silence settles over the city. The ruins of Stalingrad are littered with burned-out tanks, Panzer IVs, T-34s half buried in ice. Among them, frozen corpses lie where they fell, locked in the final poses of battle. The news hits Berlin like a thunderclap. The invincible army of the Reich has been destroyed. For the Soviet Union, Stalingrad is a resurrection. For Germany, it is a wound that will never heal. In its smoke and rubble, the legend of the T-34 is written in steel, a symbol of endurance, of industry, of a nation that would not die. And in the drawing rooms of German engineers, plans for revenge harden into metal. The Tiger and the Panther will soon roar to life. July 1943, Kursk, Western Russia. The dawn air is thick with dust and diesel fumes. Over the rolling wheat fields, an ocean of armor stretches to the horizon. The Germans have gathered everything they have left for one final gamble, Operation Citadel, the largest tank battle in history. Major Butcher, now commanding a company of Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger Horn, runs his gloved hand along the cold barrel of his 88mm gun. The sheer size of the machine is awe-inspiring, 57 tons of steel-thick armor that even the T-34's shells struggle to pierce. For the first time in 2 years, he feels a flicker of confidence. Maybe now, he mutters, we can give them back what they gave us. Around him, 2 700 German tanks, Tigers, Panthers, Panzer IVs, idle in formation. Opposite them, more than 3,000 Soviet tanks wait behind defensive belts layered with mines, trenches, and anti-tank guns. The Red Army has learned the art of defense. The stage is set for an armored apocalypse. At 0430 hours, the horizon erupts. Thousands of guns open fire at once, lighting the morning like a storm of lightning. German shells tear through Soviet lines, but the defenders hold. When the tanks roll forward, the ground trembles as if alive. Butcher's Tiger leads the charge. Through the narrow sight slit, he sees the flash of Soviet guns, the silhouettes of T-34s rising over ridgelines. He fires one round, then another. Each hit sends a T-34 blooming into fire. The 88mm cannon built for flak now rules the battlefield. Target destroyed, his gunner shouts. 2 more on the right. Keep firing, Butcher yells, heart hammering. The Tiger's shells carve open the enemy ranks. Soviet tankers call them monsters, invincible, unkillable, crawling fortresses. But for every T-34 that burns, 3 more appear. The battlefield becomes chaos, a boiling sea of armor smoke and shattered earth. Near the village of Prokhorovka, over 200 tanks collide at point-blank range. The air fills with the scream of ricochets and the thunder of impact. Soviet tank commanders drive straight into the German line, sacrificing dozens of T-34s to close the range. At under 300 meters, even the Tiger can die. A shell slams into Butcher's turret ring, jamming it. We're hit, his driver shouts. Turrets stuck, rotate the hull, bring the gun around manually. Through the smoke, he sees a T-34 charging straight at them. It's on fire tracks, half broken but still moving. The Soviet crew rams them head-on. The impact rattles the Tiger like an earthquake. Both machines shudder to a halt. Butcher hears the hiss of fuel, the clang of a hatch, then the explosion. When he comes to, he's half-deaf, the world a blur of flame and steel. His Tiger still stands scorched, but alive. The crew inside, 2 dead, 2 wounded. Outside, the field is littered with burning wrecks, German and Soviet, indistinguishable in the inferno. By nightfall, both armies have bled themselves dry. Kursk is a slaughterhouse, thousands of tanks destroyed, tens of thousands dead. The German offensive falters, then breaks. In Berlin, the generals call it a tactical setback. On the ground, the truth is clear. The Tiger and Panther, though powerful, are too few and too complex. Their transmissions fail. Engines overheat. Mechanics work by torchlight to keep them running. For every Tiger lost, a dozen T-34s replace it. As Soviet engineers recover the battlefield, they study the Tiger's wrecks. Within months, new Soviet designs appear, the T-34-85 with thicker armor and a bigger gun. The arms race has entered its most ferocious phase. For Butcher, Kursk is the beginning of the end. We won the duels, he writes in his diary, but lost the war of numbers. The German dream of technological supremacy has collided with industrial reality. The T-34, once dismissed as crude, has become the standard by which all others are measured. Autumn 1943, the fields of Ukraine burn again. After the failure at Kursk, the Red Army no longer fears the Wehrmacht. Instead, it hunts them. Columns of T-34-85s, the latest variant armed with the deadly 85mm ZIS S-53 gun, roll westward in endless procession. Their new larger turrets bristle with confidence. For the first time, Soviet tankers can meet the Tiger on equal terms. The battlefield has changed. The initiative is gone from the Germans. Everywhere they are reacting, never dictating. Major Karl-Heinz Butcher, his face older, his uniform faded, commands what remains of his company from a battered Tiger. The radio crackles, enemy armor sighted at least a regiment's worth. Stand fast, Butcher replies. We hold until dark. But holding against the Red Army now feels like stopping a flood with bare hands. The Soviets have learned precision and coordination. Their new doctrine, the deep battle, sends waves of armor supported by self-propelled guns, Katyusha rockets, and relentless artillery. They no longer throw men blindly at German lines. They break them methodically. At dawn, the horizon blooms with fire. Soviet shells howl overhead, pounding the German positions. The earth shakes beneath Butcher's boots. Then through the smoke, the shapes emerge, dozens of T-34s, advancing in staggered formation, dust pluming behind them like storm clouds. Range 800. Fire. The Tiger's gun barks. A T-34 explodes, turret thrown skyward. Hit target destroyed, the gunner cries. Next one left, they destroy 3, then 5. But for every tank that burns, another takes its place. The Soviet line never stops moving. The field becomes a sea of fire. Suddenly a shell slams into their left side. The Tiger shudders. Penetration, side armor breached. Butcher grips the hatch rim. All crews fall back, reverse, but the transmission jams. The Tiger, monstrous and powerful, becomes a coffin of steel. Another hit, and the interior erupts in smoke. The commander slams the hatch open, dragging his gunner with him. Flames roar from the engine deck. They tumble into the mud as the tank behind them explodes. When Butcher looks up, he sees a T-34 cresting the ridge, red star bright on its turret gun, pointed directly at him. For a moment, time freezes. Then the Soviet commander waves instead of firing. He salutes and rolls on. Butcher stares after it, stunned. He will remember that moment for the rest of his life. By the end of 1943, the Eastern Front is collapsing. The Wehrmacht retreats across the Dnieper. Kiev falls. The myth of German invincibility is gone. In the air, Soviet Sturmovix strafe fleeing convoys. On the ground, partisan bands cut supply lines. And always the T-34 leads the way. Unstoppable, simple to repair, built in numbers the Germans can scarcely imagine. At a Berlin meeting, Albert Speer presents Figures to Hitler. Our factories produce 200 tanks a month at best. The Soviets produce more than twice that, and theirs require a fraction of the labor. Hitler's jaw tightens. Then we must make ours better. But better has become the enemy of enough. The Tiger and Panther are marvels of design, but they need hours of maintenance for every hour in combat. Their engines overheat, their tracks snap, their transmissions seize. The Soviets simply build another T-34 when one breaks. The war of attrition has become a war of multiplication, and Germany cannot multiply fast enough. As winter approaches again, the Red Army crosses into the former Reich territories. Snow falls over fields littered with wrecks, tigers buried in ice, panthers overturned in craters, and among them, T-34s still crawling forward. Turrets blackened, but guns unbroken. For Butcher, it is clear the monster Germany created to slay the T-34 has devoured its own future instead. January 1944, the frozen plains of Belarus. The night sky glows faintly red from distant bombardment. Columns of exhaust hang low over the steppe as the Red Army prepares its next offensive. In the lead, as always, are the T-34-85s, their engines rumbling like 1,000 heartbeats beneath the snow. Sergeant Ivan Kozadob wipes frost from his periscope lens. Fuel at half, he mutters. His commander, Captain Morozov, nods. Doesn't matter. We go until the enemy breaks. The crew laughs, half out of nerves, half out of faith. They know what their machine can do. At dawn, the offensive begins. Operation Bagration, the Soviet hammer blow that will annihilate the German Army Group Center. Artillery fire rolls across the horizon like thunder. The earth trembles. Overhead, IL-2 Sturmovik scream downward, their cannons shredding German convoys. Then the tanks move. Hundreds of T-34s surge forward in waves, tracks churning through snow and mud alike. The radio crackles. Forward, comrades! Crush them under our treads. On the German side, the response is chaos. The Wehrmacht's armored divisions are shadows of their former strength. Half their tanks broken, supplies dwindling. Panthers and Tigers still prowl the front, but their numbers are too small, their fuel too scarce. Major Butcher, now weary and hollow-eyed, commands one of the few remaining Tigers of his battalion. He can hear the thunder before he sees it, a sound like the ocean breaking against cliffs. Contact north tank columns at least 100. He climbs up through the hatch, scanning the ridgeline. In the gray distance, he sees them dark shapes, dozens of them growing larger by the second. His gunner whispers, "My God, how many are there?" "Too many," Butcher replies. He gives the order to fire. The Tiger's 88mm roars, hurling a shell that rips through the first T-34's turret. Another hit, another kill. The smell of cordite fills the cabin. But the line doesn't stop. The Soviets keep coming, engines howling, guns blazing. Left flank collapsing, the radio squawks. "Then hold the center," Butcher yells back. Moments later, an armor-piercing shell strikes their Tiger square in the side. Sparks explode across the cabin. The loader screams shrapnel in his arm. Butcher forces the hatch open and looks out. The field is chaos. T-34s are everywhere, some burning, some pressing forward through the smoke. A Soviet tank rams a Panther nearby, both bursting into flame. The heat washes over him. He slams the hatch shut. Fall back, reverse, reverse. But there's nowhere to go. Soviet armor has already surrounded them. The Tiger's engine groans, track jammed. A shell lands close, flipping the tank onto its side. Everything goes black. When Butcher wakes hours later, he's lying in the snow. His Tiger lies upside down, turret half buried. Nearby, a column of T-34s rolls past, heading west toward Minsk. Not one fires at him. He lies still, watching them go. The sight is surreal, hundreds of tanks stretching to the horizon, red stars gleaming under a pale sun. A river of iron flowing toward Germany. In Berlin, panic spreads. Reports from the front describe complete annihilation. Hitler calls it treason. His generals call it catastrophe. The Red Army has broken through every defense line. By July, they will retake Minsk, then cross into Poland. For the soldiers who survive, the war becomes a retreat without end. The once mighty Wehrmacht architects of Blitzkrieg now flee before an enemy they once mocked. And everywhere the symbol of that reversal rolls past the T-34, its gun blackened, its armor scarred, but still moving, still unstoppable. As Butcher limps away through the snow, he knows the truth. The tank that Germany laughed at in 1941 now dictates the fate of Europe. January 1945, East Prussia. Snow swirls like ash through the ruins of what was once the heart of the Reich. The thunder of Soviet artillery never stops now. It's the heartbeat of a dying empire. Columns of refugees clog the frozen roads, farmers, widows, children, pushing carts and carrying what little they can before the red wave arrives. Among them, the remnants of Germany's armored divisions pull back westward. Their machines are ghosts, patched together from scrap, stripped for parts, fueled with desperation. In their wake comes an army of vengeance, the Red Army's first Belarusian front, spearheaded by thousands of T-34-85s and IS-2 heavy tanks. Major Karl-Heinz Butcher rides in a staff car, now not a tank. His once proud regiment exists only on paper. He passes wreck after wreck, burned-out tigers, panthers, with frozen tracks, columns of dead horses. "We built monsters," he mutters, "and they devoured us." At dawn near the town of Insterburg, the horizon flashes orange. The first Soviet shells land within minutes. The bombardment lasts for hours, a rolling wall of sound that crushes all thought. When it lifts, the earth itself seems to move. Across the white fields they come again, lines of T-34s, their silhouettes shimmering in the heat haze of fire and snow. Behind them march infantry red banners whipping in the wind. Butcher's radio crackles with broken voices. "They're through the river line. We can't stop them. Too many. Where are the reserves?" There are no reserves, only ruins. At Königsberg, the last of the German Tigers dig in as bunkers. They fire until their barrels melt, until their crews are buried inside their own armor. The once mighty 88s claim dozens of T-34s, but it's like emptying a bucket into a flood. A Soviet war correspondent later writes, "The battlefield looked like a black ocean frozen in mid-wave. Burnt-out tanks lay beside our own no victors, only survivors." By March, the T-34 has crossed into Germany proper. Town by town, the Red Army grinds westward. Villagers watch in silence as endless convoys of tanks rumble past. Inside one of those tanks, Sergeant Kozadub, the same man who fought at Stalingrad, stares at the wreckage of a German Tiger. Its armor is pitted and blackened, its gun drooping like a dead limb. He remembers the terror those machines once inspired. Now they're just corpses of steel. He turns to his commander. "Comrade, how far to Berlin?" "Not far now," comes the grin. In the Führerbunker, hundreds of kilometers away, Hitler studies maps covered in red arrows. His generals stand silent. He rants about miracle weapons, jets, rockets, new tanks. But everyone knows it's over. The Tigers and Panthers, his symbols of might, lie abandoned across the east. The factories are in ruins. Fuel is gone. Meanwhile, the T-34, simple, rugged, and countless, keeps rolling. Across bridges, through forests, over the bones of Europe, it pushes toward Berlin. In April, the sound of its engine echoes through Berlin's shattered streets. Flames light the night sky. Soviet infantry ride on the turrets, faces blackened with soot. At last, the tank that couldn't be killed reaches the gates of the Reich Chancellery. For Germany, it is the sound of final judgment, the roar of the very machine they once dismissed as crude. For the men who had fought it like Butcher, it is a requiem of steel. April 30th, 1945, Berlin, Germany. The city is a furnace of smoke and ruin. Buildings collapse into cratered streets. Firestorms rage unchecked. Every intersection echoes with the crash of collapsing masonry and the dull, rhythmic growl of engines. The Soviet army is here, Marshal Zhukov's first Belarusian front, and with it thousands of T-34-85s crawling through the wreckage of Hitler's capital. Sergeant Ivan Kozadub's tank inches down Wilhelmstrasse, its treads grinding over broken cobblestone and the remains of streetcars. The radio crackles with orders, "Objective Reichstag." Repeat, Reichstag. He peers through the gun sight. The city is a maze of barricades and shadows. Every corner could hide a Panzerfaust. Snipers pick off tank commanders the moment a hatch opens. Yet the Red Army advances block by block at a cost of thousands. The T-34s fire point blank into buildings turned into fortresses. Each shot sends avalanches of brick and dust cascading through doorways. German Volkssturm units, boys and old men, dart from alleys with grenades vanishing under machine gun bursts. Above the chaos, a Soviet banner flutters from a shattered rooftop. The Reichstag, blackened and pitted by shellfire, looms ahead. "Comrade, there it is," Kozadub's driver whispers. Their tank lurches forward, hull scraped by debris. Another T-34 alongside them explodes, a Panzerfaust hit. Shrapnel rains down. The crew keeps going, deafened and half-blind. Inside, heat and smoke make every breath a struggle. But they don't stop. At 3:00 a.m., under a blood-red dawn, Kozadub's unit reaches the square before the Reichstag. Hundreds of tanks and infantry converge. The earth trembles with each blast. When at last Soviet soldiers raise the red flag atop the building, every surviving T-34 fires its gun in salute. A thunderclap that drowns out the dying echoes of the Reich. In the cellars beneath the chancellery, Adolf Hitler lies dead by his own hand. The empire built on conquest collapses in on itself. For the men still fighting in the rubble, the war ends not with glory, but exhaustion. Major Karl-Heinz Butcher, now a prisoner, sits amid the ruins near Potsdamer Platz. He watches as a column of T-34s rumbles past their hulls streaked with soot and victory slogans. A Soviet lieutenant pauses to glance at him, a brief meeting of eyes between enemies who have survived too long. Butcher murmurs, "We thought we could conquer them. We didn't understand they conquered the impossible." The lieutenant says nothing, only nods, and his tank moves on toward the Tiergarten. As the guns fall silent, the statistics of the war reveal the scale of what those machines achieved. More than 57,000 T-34s built during the conflict. Tens of thousands of German tanks and guns destroyed. An industrial miracle that turned the tide of the largest land war in human history. The T-34 was never the most advanced, never the heaviest, never the prettiest. But it was the right machine built for the right war, a perfect marriage of simplicity and endurance. For every Tiger that rolled off a German line, 10 T-34s came out of Soviet foundries. And when the smoke cleared, it was the T-34 that stood in the ruins of Berlin, its engine still idling, its turret still turning toward whatever came next. In the silence after victory, Kozhedub steps down from his tank and places a hand on its scorched hull. "You got us here," he whispers. The steel beneath his palm is still warm. Behind him, the sun rises over a dead city. The war in Europe is over. But the legend of the T-34, the tank that couldn't be killed, has only just begun. May 1945, Berlin lies silent. Smoke drifts between the ruins, rising in thin gray ribbons toward a pale sky. The echoes of artillery have faded. Only the sound of boots on rubble of wind through shattered windows, and the distant clatter of tank tracks moving east again, not in war, but in triumph. The war that began with the roar of panzer engines ends beneath the treads of Soviet steel. In a Soviet field camp on the outskirts of the city, Sergeant Ivan Kozhedub sits beside his T-34, streaked with ash and bullet scars. Mechanics patch holes with scrap metal, repainting its turret with a fresh red star. The number 301 gleams faintly through the soot. A journalist from Pravda asks comrade, "How does it feel to have fought in the tank that brought us victory?" Kozhedub smiles faintly, eyes tired. "It feels like surviving the impossible," he says. "But this tank, she never stopped moving, even when we wanted to." He looks out over a field of wrecks, German, Soviet, American, British, all twisted by fire. In the end, he adds quietly, "Steel doesn't care who built it, only who believed in it more." Far away in the West, captured German officers give their reports to Allied intelligence. Among them is Major Karl-Heinz Butcher. When asked which enemy weapon impressed him most, he answers without hesitation, the T-34. It was the shock of the war. We learned too late that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. He describes the moment he first saw it, June 1941, near Dubisa River, shells bouncing off its armor, disbelief on his crew's faces. "That was the day we realized our war would not be swift," he says. "It would be survival." His interviewer notes how Butcher pauses almost reverently when saying the tank's name, as if acknowledging a rival worthy of respect. In the months that follow, as Europe rebuilds, the tank's legend spreads. From Prague to Warsaw, from the Elbe to the Pacific. Stories of the invincible Soviet tank fill newspapers and textbooks. For millions, the T-34 becomes more than a weapon. It becomes a symbol of resilience, of sacrifice, of the ordinary turned extraordinary. In the Kremlin, engineers already plan the next generation, the T-54, the child of the T-34's design philosophy. Its sloped armor and low silhouette will dominate Cold War battlefields for decades. And yet, the old machines refuse to die. Across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, T-34s will fight again in Korea, in Sinai, in Angola, in Vietnam. Each time they bear the same defiant shape, the same indestructible spirit. In a museum years later, A single T-34 stands on a marble plinth in Moscow's Victory Park. Children climb onto its turret, posing for photos. Veterans sit nearby, their medals catching the light. One of them, gray-haired, slow-moving, places his hand on the tank's side and whispers something inaudible. He could be anyone, Kozadub, or someone like him, a man who once looked through a cracked gun sight and saw both death and destiny. He closes his eyes and hears again the echoes of engines across the steppe, the hiss of snow on hot steel, and the voices of friends long gone. For him, the T-34 isn't a relic. It's memory made of metal. Historians will debate its place in the pantheon of war machines. Was it the best, the most balanced, the most influential? But numbers tell the truth. No other design changed history so completely, nor carried so much of a nation's burden. In the end, the tank that Germany once mocked as crude, backward, and unrefined became the weapon that broke the Wehrmacht's spine. The T-34 was not perfection. It was persistence forged in fire, tempered in blood, and driven by a nation's will to survive. Its tracks carved the path from the ashes of Moscow to the ruins of Berlin. And in that trail of iron lies the story of a world reborn.